Okay, welcome back and well done if you successfully created your object wall and it now appears in your objects folder there. I'm going to create some more objects now, and these objects are going to control the fruit. So every piece of fruit that you have for different sprites for, we're going to need an object for. So we create another object which will go into our game. So I'll press on the blue ball icon at the top of the screen there in the toolbar. Using the same naming convention, I'll call it obj underscore, and we'll do the apple first because alphabetically it's what's first in our list. Makes sense. So I've named it object underscore apple. I then attach the sprite to this object by clicking the icon here. Clearly we would attach the apple sprite. Okay, and then we bring into play these two parts of this window here, the events and the actions. Now these are the most important parts of Game Maker if you want your game to actually do something, if you want the player to be able to interact and play your game. So the first event that I'm going to add is going to be the create event. Now in order to add events, there's lots of different ones, but you can just see at this screen here, this window, you've got the add event button. So if I click there, lots of different events that you can add to your game will appear. Now I just said we're going to add this create one, but there are others and we'll be using these throughout the tutorials and throughout the games that you make. Create is a really important one, and one that features in many games because what we want to happen to the object when the game is created or when the game loads and somebody plays it. So as soon as they press play, this is what happens straight away before any other interaction takes place. So when I click on create here, so what we're saying is when the apple is loaded into the game and the game is created or the game loads up, we want something to happen. We want some actions to occur. Now the actions that we want to occur is we want the apple to move around the screen in different directions and at a certain speed. So you can see over on the right hand side here you've got lots of little icons or buttons that you can use to get your apple to do something or your object to do something. Now we want it to move, so in the move tab here you can see that you've got some red arrows, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag that into the actions window. This then gives me some options on how I want that object to move. Now I want it to move in all directions. So at the moment it's not moving in any directions. You can see these arrows are blue. So I'm actually just going to tick them all. I'm going to click on them all with the mouse so that they're all red apart from that middle one. Okay, so it can move in any of those directions. We allow it to. You can see just underneath the speed is 0. So at the moment it won't actually move. Even though it can move, it won't because the speed is set to 0. The higher number you put in here, the faster your object will move. So I'm just going to choose 8, so a speed of 8 because I know that speed and I know it to be quite a good speed. So maybe if we added another level and it was a bit more of a challenging level, the speed may increase, so it would be harder to catch this fruit. And then I'm going to click OK. So that's the first event that we've added to the object apple. It might be worth pausing this video now and actually creating that event and that action. Okay, so the next event that we want to add is what happens when the object apple hits that wall object that we created in the previous tutorial. So we add another event, so you can have a number of events on one object. It's not a problem. And looking at this list here, I want something to happen when the apple hits the wall. And another word for, I suppose, hits here is collision. So when this object apple has a collision with another object, we want something to happen. So in the event of this collision happening, we want an action to happen. So if it collides with the wall, and you can see that the objects that you've created will appear in this list because of course we've previously created the object wall, it's there. So you can see here now that it's added the event collision with the wall. Well, we've got no actions to take place, so we need to add one now. So if we have a look, we don't want it to move. Well, we do kind of want it to move, but not in a direction or in a position we've chosen. But we want it to sort of jump, or in this case bounce. So you can see this icon here, if you just roll over it, it's actually bounce. So if the apple does hit the wall, we want it just to bounce off. So I'm going to click that and then take it over there. And you can say here whether you want it to be precise or not, and whether it's against solid objects or not. And if you remember, we made that wall solid, therefore it will hit the solid object. And we don't want it to be precisely, we want it to just appear somewhere else in the game. So we'll leave it at that, and we'll click OK. Okay, so we've got two events now happening on Object Apple. We're going to add one more, and this is what will happen when the user clicks on the fruit. So we'll have another look in our list of add events, and you can see here that we've got a mouse button. So in the event that the mouse button is clicked, okay, now we can choose here which mouse button or what part of it, or even if you had a joystick attached to your computer, you could select the joystick buttons here. And you can imagine, you know, you're playing at home on your Xbox or your PlayStation, these are the commands that you would give in the event of those. But we're going to use a PC today, and we've got the Mac, a mouse attached to our desktop PCs, and often, or most familiarly to us, is a left button. So we'll click on the event that the left mouse button is clicked, or we want something to happen. So what we want to happen are two things. We want that piece of fruit to go to a different location in the game, because we don't want it to stay in one place, because then you could just clicking in the same place and you'd get lots and lots of points for not doing very much. So the first thing, when the left button clicks onto that object apple, we want it to jump to a random location. So you can see over on our actions buttons here, we've got jump and then jump to random. So I'm going to pop that one in. So that's going to happen. Okay, I'm just going to click OK there. That's going to jump to a random location. And then the second thing we want to happen is for it to add a score to the game. So we want to give the player some points if they do click on the fruit. So you can see that there is nothing here in the Move tab for score, but there are lots of tabs down the right hand side of this window, and of course one third from the bottom there is score. So these are all the different things you've got to change for score. So you can see that you can add scores here, you can change lives, or you can change health. So what we want to do is just the first one here is quite simple. We're going to set the score. So I'm going to drag that across, and you can choose whatever score you like here, but I'm going to give the player 50 points every time they click on a piece of fruit. Now there's a very important button that needs to be ticked when you're dealing with scores, and if I didn't tick it, it would not add an additional 50 to the previous score. You have to tick relative here. If you want, when they click on the second piece of fruit, they add another 50 to the first 50 and then give you 100. Otherwise it will always remain at 50. So that's a really important tick there, and then click OK. Now that has set up your Apple object. What you need to do now is apply this to all of your other pieces of fruit. So you need to go to your game now, create an object for Apple, add your create event and your start moving in any direction action. You need to add your collision event and your bounce against solid action. And you need to add your left mouse button click and add your jump to random and add a score action. Any problems, just keep going back through the video until you come back with all of the objects for all of